Kia ora, and welcome to Constellations and All That. I'm your host, Tracy Cartwright, and together we will be exploring the world of family constellations with facilitators and clients from around the world, looking at different perspectives and experiences in the work, having a cup of tea and just chatting with some friends around their experiences in constellations. We'd love for you to join us. I hope that you enjoy this series as much as I have loved making it. Kia ora everyone, and welcome to Constellations and All That. Today I have the pleasure of talking with Annie. Kia ora, Annie, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you
Oh,
for inviting me here.
you're welcome. It's a real pleasure. I'm just admiring how beautiful you're looking at the moment with you've got some color in your hair, and yeah, things have changed a little bit
It's
since
fun.
it's gorgeous, gorgeous. I'd love for you to introduce yourself and share a little bit with the audience of who you are, where you're from, whatever's there for you on the top, whatever you'd like to share.
Wow. Yeah, maybe just briefly. I live in India. I live in Bangalore. Well, with a focus on constellation. I teach constellation in Bangalore, and Colette Green and I have been teaching since 2014. And yeah, so this has been my journey.
What were you doing before you met Constellations?
Hi, that's a good question. Actually, I was a psychotherapist in transactional analysis,
Mm.
and I don't know, have you heard of transactional analysis?
I've
Have you met
heard of
that?
it, but I actually don't know what it is.
Well, it was developed by Dr. Eric Byrne, and it is a way of understanding, it's a language that understands, really deep psychological processes at a level that is pragmatic and, helps you understand that. And of
Mm.
course, it's grown over the years. So, that and NLP. So I was really in learning, integrating that in my work. And I was also teaching TA and then, supervising. So I continue to supervise now. I don't teach TA anymore, but I continue to supervise. It's been very interesting because I find that both of these speak into now, into constellation. I think the way I integrated constellation, I received constellation, I tried to keep it without too many other things interfering or trying to fit it into other frameworks. But now I find that perhaps of years of experience, I find that I'm very easily integrating it, and
Mm.
I understand its separateness and also how it fits. It's interesting that Bert also had threads of TA and NLP in his work. Yeah.
Yes, I saw something recently with him using some NLP in a constellation. And that was one of the first times, it was probably one of his later
Mm,
videos. It was one of the
mm.
first times I'd seen him doing something different. And yeah, it was interesting. Something to witness.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting because it takes us right back into the body, into the soma, and how, the language of the body, and
Yeah,
allows us to make, that the shifts that happen when we see that and when we change something.
it's so important, isn't it, to have that felt experience in it.
Yeah.
Well, how did constellations find you? That's the way I'm addressing this question now, because I
Yeah.
feel like constellations
Yeah.
find us.
Yeah, constellation is a good question because constellation found me, or I found constellation and just sort of duck to water kind of thing. I met constellation through Colette Green and Sebastian, her husband Sebastian Green. They're in Ireland, and they, weren't learning with Bert, and in 2008, Colette ran his London program for him.
And did you
And,
go to Ireland or did she come to India?
I always tease her that she's half Indian because she's been coming to India since she was a teenager. So she
Um,
knew India. So she was,
yeah.
coming in, doing the work, just doing the work wherever she could. And my colleague and I were running an organization for psychotherapy, and we invited her. And, we didn't have place, and we had a little garage which we sort of painted up and got all spruced up. And that's how it began, in our garage in
Wow.
Bangalore. Yeah.
Wow.
And so they came in and she did the work. And she was to come again the next year, but she couldn't for some reason. And then my colleague went to Burnreed, and then I went to Burnreed, for the ISCA.
I am so jealous that I've heard so many great things about Bernard.
Yes, yes, Burnreed was beautiful. And so I
Mm,
went there for several years, every year, whenever I could. And then also, followed certain masters and, Stefan Hausner and
mm,
Albrecht and Franz Rupert and, wherever I got the chance, and Bert, of course, when he was in Bad Reichenhall. So just followed whenever I could and learned it. And I felt it sort of sat very well with my own path in life. And that spiritual essence of the work, which is so inclusive, I think that touched me. So it didn't feel separate from me, it just felt,
mm.
yeah.
I know you touched briefly just before around how originally you were very traditional in it, and now things are starting to come in a little bit of NLP and stuff. How do you see that change how you facilitate, if you've noticed anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always integrated it because I mean it was just very much part of
Mm,
me. You can't keep that separate, but I always saw it in the eyes of the systemic lens,
right, yeah.
and it was just a way to work. Yeah, I didn't try and put constellation into a label of to understand TA or NLP. I sort of integrated that into the constellation, into the
Mm,
work I did. And I think I continue to do that. Yeah. So even when we teach, it's try to keep it more to how I understood it through Bert and through
right.
some of the other, it's, and I guess both Colette's and my lineage is also in psychotherapy, and so there is that. So we step aside from it, and yet we are informed by it.
Beautiful. How do you, when you're talking with people who've never heard of family constellations and they think you're talking about star signs or something, how do you describe
That
it?
one. I find that very difficult, especially when people come to me at parties and you're just having a good time and they're trying to say, what's constellation? And you sort of have to bring yourself back or say, I'll explain it to you another time. I feel needs a certain gravitas when you're talking about it. It's not flippant. It's not party talk for me. But I often try to explain it through that, we carry within us our, all the events and our ancestors and what they have gone through and what they may be patterns that they followed. So we may notice some of that, or we may be doing it very unconsciously. In fact, it's interesting because just last night I was trying to explain it to a friend of mine. I had seen a couple few years ago at an art biennale in Port Cochin, there was a movie by Akif, and he had talked about reflective mirrors. And he had talked about, the phantom leg, what
Yeah.
happens when people miss their leg and they have a phantom leg, and yet they feel that the leg is there. They feel the pain, they feel all of that, even though the leg is not there. And so the way of working with people who've lost a limb was to use reflective mirrors to reflect the whole so they can see both and then they can see all, and then work with them to come to terms with how it is for them. And I thought that was a brilliant way of really understanding constellation, because then he did talk about the systems. and what has been excluded or missing in systems, or the traumas that have happened. It's about reflecting back to include it through constellation, through the methodology of constellation, bringing it to the now. So I found that quite beautiful for my own understanding as well. I find the methodology is a little more difficult to explain. And I often say, just experience it.
I think that a lot of us say that.
But I do know that, I mean, a lot of people find it very difficult to explain what is constellation, really. And it needs
Mm.
a certain time. It's not just a one sentence kind of thing.
Did you find when you first met it, did it feel familiar to you?
Part of it did, especially the patterns and ancestors. And well, I had already met script with TA. It's very much a part of transactional analysis. Our script and our ancestral script that has come through. So
Ah, yeah.
that was very much already in place. So it was not new in that way. It has many things that Bert talks about is that there is, I mean, I can see it, it's familiar. I think
Mm.
what's different though is the methodology and the wisdom, and certainly the high art of helping. Bert has
Mm.
talked about how do we help as helpers. I think that's really what's very special about Constellation for
Would you
me.
like to share a little bit more about that for the listeners? Because that is one thing that he, yeah, talks quite a bit about, isn't it?
Yeah, and how we are. So the orders of helping. He talks about the orders of helping.
Mm.
How to be a helper if we're helpers. So, he talks about our own personal transformation. He puts that right there in the beginning, our own personal transformation. Then, working without judgment, without good and bad. And that's constellation. You work without moral judgment of good and bad because we're
Mm.
working in the group conscience as well. And there is no good and bad there. I mean, these are gems for me. And you work without regret. He says, when we go back to regret of how things were for somebody, I mean, although we're sensitive about it, we are not feeling sorry for the other. We
Mhm.
are, we are really saying that that's how it was for you. And it was, you went through whatever you did. But he says when you work with regret, it's like you're going into a fantasy with them or something else. You wish something was different, whereas you're agreeing to how things are exactly as they are. It's very freeing for the helper, is that we don't have to enter into the transference with the other, which means that you don't have to really go in as a parent or taking care or nurturing. You stand there as an adult and you give the place for the other with their destiny and with their fate, and respect that. They are not drawing you into being a mother to them.
Yeah.
Uh, in which case you'll end up, as he says, in the same loop. From my experience, this really strengthens the person rather, it gives them, you're encouraging them to stand in their place.
Because otherwise, if we're helping and not in that way, then we're taking from them, we're depleting, aren't we?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
people who want to rescue to help, they think they're
yes,
helping, is
yeah,
very much an out of balance, depletion, and perpetration, really.
yes, yes, yes. You put that well. So when we are, and we go in there. I mean, there's a softness. It's not all. It is, there is a caring and softness, and yet you don't carry that through. You're not. It's there, and then you
Yeah.
move back. The other one that I think they're all gems, but I really find absolutely, a real gem in Constellation is that you give everybody a good place. So
Mm.
if, your client or seeker, we call them, is complaining about their spouse or their something, we immediately, give them also a good place, that we are not standing with the client with their complaints against their parents. We're really standing and seeing their parents in their place and honoring them as parents. And in doing so, I think what we're really doing is allowing space for your client to also have that room and that space.
Exactly. It feels like by, as facilitators, giving them that space that allows there's more of even like a space to breathe, which then allows the client to see something from a different perspective.
Yes, yes, because they've always complained about that person or that
Mm,
thing. And
yeah.
so stepping back and just giving that a place, a softer place, a more caring place, may allow the client to see that as well
Yeah.
through the
When you're working in one-on-ones with clients, how do you do it? Some people use tabletop, some people use like objects on a tabletop, and some people use floor markers, or some people only work online. How do you like to work?
I prefer working in a group,
Yeah.
and I prefer now that hopefully we are past COVID, I try and set up more places to meet in person. I
Hmm.
love that human contact.
Yes.
And so that's my preferred way. But of course, much of the teaching is online and much of some of the other work is online. At the moment, I must say that my teaching is online, but if I do work, then do it in a group. I work within a group and in person if I can.
And so
So
do you do one-on-ones or just groups?
at the moment, more for my own space and time, I'm I don't take that on at the moment.
Mm.
I'm just working in this way. But one-on-one, if I did it or as I'm teaching it, would be, if it's online, then it would be with figures as representatives.
Yeah. Do you have specific things, or do you just get people to have random? Do they have the tools?
Yes, they
Yeah.
would. I found that that's good because really it's theirs. And when it's very interesting what they bring in and
Mm.
what they
Mm.
have, unconsciously what they bring in to
It's
represent.
fascinating, isn't it?
Amazing.
So fascinating when people are using inert objects to represent, and it makes me think of, I remember this young girl, and she very much cared. She was very much looking after her mum and dad, and of course everything that was then really out of whack. And when she got representations for her mum and dad, there were tiny little objects. And
Yeah.
then she got it was like a really big drink bottle. Really, really big drink bottle was hers.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Yeah.
tells you so much
Mm,
already. Yeah.
mm,
And I remember somebody bring this big shining ball onto the table for
mm,
herself. And everybody else was, some plainer object. And,
mm. Do
it
you tell them who they are choosing, or do you leave it what we call blind, as you know what blind is, but when the client doesn't know who they're choosing?
you mean with objects,
Would
with
you
figures?
say choose an object for your mother and then they choose one? Or yeah.
Yeah, I would do that, especially if they're very new to the work. I just find that, if they just need to get their head around it. But if I find that it's going another way, that there is something unnamed that is still, it's not coming up, I may go with just choose and not name it. I sort of move, but I don't work purely like this or purely. It depends on what comes up.
Sometimes I'll do the whole constellation and they have no idea
Yeah.
who they are working with.
And,
And
and
and I love that, because then
yeah,
there's no interpretation for like they're just
yeah,
feeling what's
yeah,
there.
yeah, that's lovely. And I like doing that if it's a physical group, in-person group. But it's lovely to hear that you do this, and it'd be really interesting.
Yeah, and sometimes I will. Sometimes I do traditional, like can you choose the object for mum,
Mm.
dad, and I find Personally, I find it that people just will tend to drop in a little bit easier if they don't know who or what. And
Mm.
then we get those ones who want to guess all the way through.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think I'm just guided by the what comes up and what's in the
Mm,
constellation, rather than have an intent already. I find that it just arrives.
beautiful, beautiful. So you're teaching constellations, family and systemic constellations. And are you doing that on your own, or do you have a colleague that you work with?
Uh, yeah, Colette and
Oh,
I
sorry,
began
yes.
Colette. Now, of course, she used to come down to India for the teaching when we were doing it in person, and then, but she's still, she's really mentor, friend, go-to supervisor, all of
Mm.
that. So she's very much in there. Though she doesn't directly teach, she supervises, etc. So just connected. Yeah, now I had someone apprenticing with me, and now she's moving in, and two of them are moving into actually taking on the teaching. And I'm sort of moving a little back.
Do you have any examples that you would feel comfortable in sharing of work where there's been a dynamic shift or something quite miraculous has come from it
Hmm.
without sharing anyone's details or anything like that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think they're there all the time. It's just what sticks in your head.
Exactly.
It's. I remember this woman who came um, to me, and she said, she just wasn't moving in terms of her career. She wasn't
Mm.
moving up. And she was also wanting a partner, and she was not finding somebody who's really in a she wanted a committed relationship. And, opening her constellation, what emerged was siblings who died. Yeah, and I think that was really something that stopped her from, unconsciously from moving ahead and getting what she desired at one, and still perhaps there was a guilt of having that. And I think what was really remarkable was after the constellation, within 3 months, she found a partner who she's still with
Wow.
some years ago, and her job moved,
Yeah.
So it was just that release of something that,
It's that belonging, order, and balance, isn't it? That when we
yeah,
bring in those who belong and we acknowledge them and give them that place. Beautiful.
yeah. And I think it's also to give them, yeah, give them a place, and the guilt of surviving. And as you say, of course, acknowledging them, and also to say, I can live.
Yes, it's actually that's part of my family story as well. So I
Mm,
know that one quite well, and it made me
mm,
think. Was making me think of someone who was a dear friend of mine when we were young, and she was the only surviving child of seven. And I remember she always had this sadness about her, and I understand now. She always tried to have joy in life, and I think her mother had a really deep sadness too. That's what I love about this work, how it gives an understanding of things, a deeper understanding. You
mm,
can have
mm.
more compassion and more understanding for
Yeah.
some of those life situations that.
I think too, it's sort of, I mean, if I look at it in my own life, it's sort of it's allowed me to grieve in a way that holds the person dear, and
Mm.
yet there is something that we let go of. There is something very, I think it's sort of, if I look back, it's held me all these years, in even though it's not just a piece of work I've done, but just in being immersed in it and understanding it. And I think, life and death and meeting it. And I think the big word perhaps for me is agreeing. agreeing to life,
Mm.
agreeing
Agreeing to what is.
is, and that
Mm.
has led me. I mean, I think, yeah, but it's taken me further, and I see that.
Have there been any roles that you've represented? Oh, hold on, let me come back to, have you represented in many constellations? I'll ask that question first. Have you had the experience to represent in many constellations?
I think especially earlier,
Mm.
when I was learning and when I was in my, going into other constellations, I was representing, I was often representing a role of a bigger role, a kind of spiritual role, the supporting role. If I look, yeah.
Yeah, because that was where my question was going to be. Well, is there any roles that representations that you've had that have really stuck with you because they've touched you in some way? And I know that we can't remember everything that we've done in the representation, but
Mm,
sometimes
mm,
there are some that you go, wow, yeah, I remember when I was doing this one and it felt, because maybe
mm.
there's something in your own system or something.
It doesn't come to me right off, Tracy, when you
Mm.
ask me that. Yeah.
Because I was thinking about when I was in Sydney in the intensive that they had there, and my friend Maria nudged me and she says, "You're God. You need to get in the field. You need to
Yeah.
get in the field. God needs to be in there." So she put it to the facilitator because she could see it, and they agreed. And so I was a little bit resistant because of I was just resistant of God or gods or whatever, I would say gods rather than God. But it was such a defining experience for me to get out of my human ego and to step into this space of just being part of everything. Didn't feel masculine, I didn't feel feminine, I didn't feel overpowering I've represented angelic energy before, and that is very shiny and bright and very it infuses out, Oops. But in the representation of God, and I didn't have anything to say, I was just there. And for me, it gave me a deeper understanding of being part of everything. I'm not religious at all. And I think that was part of my resistance to even step into that role because I had preconceived biases, I suppose would be the word. So yeah, so to have that, to step in, and it was like I had to peel back at some things as I did it. It wasn't an automatic. I stepped in like some
Yeah.
roles could step in to represent. This one was
Mm.
like me peeling back my human ego, my just get to the essence of what um, this unconditional being is. And
Yeah.
that's what it felt like. So it's
Yeah.
probably one, and there've been a couple of others that have really stood out that have been interesting. Yeah.
I think what drew me to the work was the spirituality within. So I was already, I guess, comfortable with that. And moving away from religion per se,
Yes.
which I find
Yes.
is more divisive and non-inclusive. And I think finding my way into spirituality that's inclusive and that's more connected and
Mm,
interconnected.
absolutely.
So,
And I've always said I'm a spiritual being, but denounced
yeah,
denounced God
yeah,
because of religious persecutions and things, stories and lineages and stuff. So yeah, I think that this work really touches on that spiritual side of
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. And
Mm.
and that being, yeah, I would say spiritual being and spiritual. And I think, yeah, yeah. I think that, in a way, when I work here, people who are spiritual, it's people talk very easily about God and spirituality here. It is not
Mm.
alien, people just, it's there.
Yeah.
So it's easily spoken about. And I think that's what draws people as well here into the work.
And you've got quite a diverse spiritual families over there, haven't you? Like there's quite a few different ones, and they all live in relative harmony, I think. Do they?
I'm not so sure politically. I'm not so sure. we're all going through a yeah. But I think that's what makes me separate religion and
Yes.
spirituality, because religion is more and more political, and I can see it like that. But in the essence of that religion is the spirituality.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think most people who come for to Constellation are opening themselves in that way.
They're looking for something, aren't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're
Or
looking
they're
for something.
drawn to them. They're
Yeah,
following a calling or something.
yeah.
How was your experience in Mexico? Mexico.
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 Yeah, it was a long pre-COVID, we were meeting physically, but since COVID, not. And I had
Mm.
I'm not much of social media person. I'm not very much of a person who can be online for too long. Um, so it was so when and I had this yearning almost to meet people in Constellation again, just to
Mm.
see the work, what's happening in other parts of the world, what's emerging. And so it was very exciting. And it was wonderful to meet the elders, and what they brought in. For me, that was very touching to meet Ingala and Francisca. But I've learned a lot from Francisca as well, and Anjuan, yeah, and so some of them, like, it was lovely to meet that, and it was lovely also to meet what is new and coming up, and where Constellation is moving. Yeah, and I love the touch and feel of meeting.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
And what a beautiful place to hold it in too. Hey?
what a beautiful
Me
place.
Mexico reminded me, and energetically, there were parts of it that really reminded me of New Zealand. I think
Mm.
in some parts, yeah. Did you stay on
No, no, I spent a few days before that. And it's interesting that you say that, Tracy, because actually Mexico reminded me of India. And
Ah,
and the place reminded me of Bangalore, the place I live in about 50 years ago, how it was.
right. Yeah.
And even the vegetation, some of the trees and are similar. So it felt like, and some of their rituals, and it was familiar.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe that's part of the interconnectedness of us all. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel very blessed to live here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. It's a great country to be in. And I loved it. I loved Mexico and I'm looking forward to coming to India. It's on my cards. So have you got any questions that you'd like to ask me?
I'd love to know how you came into Constellation.
Hmm. I came into constellations. I was already doing a lot of energy work and healing and clearing work. And there was a time in my family situation where my dad was very unwell. And I've shared this before on here. He was a catalyst for me to make major changes in my life. And they weren't always delivered in a kind way. We'll just say that. I was I had to go to Wellington, which is about, if I was to drive there, it's about 10 to 12 hours from where I live. But I flew down to Wellington, and before I left, my dad had done something that had really, really made me very upset. And so luckily, got to meet someone who was visiting who did family constellations at this healing weekend that I was at. And I got to sit in the hot seat and could see the bigger picture of everything that was going on. And then as I'm sitting in the hot seat afterwards, I heard, "This is what you have been waiting for. This is this is what you're here to do. You
Mm.
know it. You just got to learn the psychology." That was what the field spoke to me. And it was like, I was quite taken back by it, but I went with it. And I think I found it And in some ways, I found it quite easy because of the energy work, and it made me realize and understand myself in different ways of how I've always been, but haven't had the words or the understanding of because I've always felt and seen energy and in the family's stories. The family's had a story around mental illness, so because I could see and feel and hear things different that others couldn't, I got put into that category. So it helped me to make more sense of what I was experiencing in life. And it's been a great tool for me.
Mm, mm. And as I'm hearing you, Tracy, I'm saying, did you want to say something just now? I'm sorry.
Mm.
Yeah. And just, and how you came into it through your energy work um and then you met it in a constellation. And for me, it is, I think, in a way, clearing some of my grief and
Mm.
that I was holding for a long time, and then meeting it. And then I met it through my psychotherapy work, and so it feels like it's at different
Mm.
parts. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also I think my spiritual being, met that, and how perhaps we both integrated it at both ends. You're
Yeah.
you're really and yeah, so it's really interesting for me to hear you say that. And of course, I attended your workshop in Mexico, and that was lovely too. The mountains and the river, and I thought how wonderful to integrate both those
Mm.
aspects. For me, it
Yeah.
felt like the masculine and the feminine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
Some people are going to take it completely literal and it's going to be a mountain and a
yeah,
river. And for
yeah,
others, you might feel your grandfather and your grandmother or your
yeah,
masculine and your feminine. And it's like
yeah,
it's open to
yeah.
all of that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What I was going to say was, I think for me in constellations, one of the biggest parts was really realizing and acknowledging how out of order I was. Like
Mm,
we shared earlier about the story of the missing siblings. So in that I was out of order because I there was two that should have been before me after my older brothers and
mm,
after there was two boys, two miscarriages, my sister and myself. So in that realm, I was out of order. But even in the first constellation, when I saw what was happening and realized I was so out of order and trying to be in the middle of my parents' relationship, probably from the earliest of age. And so it was such an eye-opener and such a weight off my shoulders and a relief to acknowledge that. It was brilliant
mm.
stuff. Yeah.
And I think what is so special about Constellation is that one is, I find we arrive there within the span of that hour or 45 minutes or whatever we have. And I know that in psychotherapy, you can work years. You won't arrive there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other is that transformation that happens there, that emerges, or it stays. It's not, it's sort of deep, and there's a movement that carries you through
Mm.
and beyond. So it's not here.
It
It's not
continues too, right?
continues.
It's that
Yeah.
ripple too. So there's more than that.
Yeah. And you see that emerging even after months, maybe years. You see something.
Yeah.
Something's, yeah.
Yeah.
There's such
Yeah.
magic in it. I just
I
love
used
that.
to say that a lot at the beginning. People would, and I'd say, oh, it's just magic, not meaning I'm a magician and this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there is a magic to it. If you, and I say that because it's not always easy to put words to it, right? But it's that, like you say, in an hour, you can shift through decades of talk therapy for some
Mm,
people.
mm.
Some people maybe a little, maybe not so much,
Yeah.
but there's just something in that space because we were in this time space vortex, I suppose. You were creating this space for things to unravel, things to be seen, things to release from your body. And yeah, it's just that magic. It's magic.
Yeah. Yeah. And the field that opens, and what shows itself, the mystery of it. And
Mm.
I think I just love that. I love to just sometimes keep things as mysteries. I don't need to know more. It's a mystery and I love it. I don't need to define everything, just accept it or agree with it. And yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's not always easy as a human to do that, but
Yeah. Yeah.
bit of practice.
And some things, I mean, it has a frame, and I think that's in constellation is I'm informed, but there is a definite scaffolding. There is a
Mm,
definite wisdom, theoretical underpinnings, if you call it. There is that. And having that, then the movement, there's mystery in the field.
there sure
Yeah.
is.
And you informed, and somewhere there is that interplay with your theory and what you understand of constellation. I call it it's the underpinnings of the work, the wisdom of the work, the philosophy, and yet energetically when we work, we're still informed, and yet we work in that mystery.
Love that. Is there a particular exercise or yeah, I suppose exercise would be the word that you like to do with in workshops or in your trainings that you feel is really important for people to have that experience?
We in the trainings we do meditations, we do coming into the body, and connecting with ourselves, connecting with a higher being, our breath. So there's all of that. That is regularly we move into that space of that. In my workshop, because people come from various experiences of their day, and we it's lovely when they move into the space of constellation. And so again, meditation, through meditations, through even I pass around cards which has just words in it, and
Mm,
see how it touches them, and not for them to say it so much, but for them to go in and reflect, and an encouragement to use less words, go into their quietness. So it's really I think designed for that, and I find that works, when the work from their quietness is they're already there rather than from a busyness.
yeah. Have you ever found that you've come across someone that you just couldn't work with?
I do find that sometimes when they're full in their own heads about something, and often there is trauma, and they're sitting there with that, they're
Mm,
not they cannot be open. They cannot be open at that time because maybe it's recent, maybe they're too full of it. I do maybe move in, and then I say, maybe not yet. Maybe I don't
mm,
sense the readiness yet.
yeah,
And there is support, but there is not moving into a constellation yet.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember Stefan Hausner in one of the intensives where, there was a woman who was I mean, she was carrying so much trauma, and she was raging, and he said, not yet. And she was even angrier, and she was
Mm,
even more raging. But
mm.
after 2 days, she came in and she did the work, and it was a beautiful piece of work. She was ready.
I remember him telling us the story about how he had, and maybe it was the same one, how he had tested the field. There was someone that he just didn't think he could work with. He didn't explain why. He just
Mm,
said that he wasn't sure that he would be able to. So he tested the field by putting a representative in for him and one for the client. And then he could see that, yeah, it was okay the way
mm.
it showed up. Yeah, I've learned a lot from him. He's been an amazing
Yeah.
teacher. He's very clear, very calm and kind in his
You're talking about
Stefan Hausner.
Stefan. Yes, yes,
Mm,
yes, yes.
mm,
What you said, good. Yeah. Yeah, he feels his way into the work.
very much so. And do you have any favorite facilitators that you
I
enjoy?
guess. Yeah, I guess Stefan is there. And I know Franz Rupert in
Mm.
Ireland. I worked with him. Yeah, I would say. And Francesca.
Yes.
I love her nature work and, really working in groups with her. But I found that was very good. It really opened up the interconnectedness and how we are not above or below, but really that interconnectedness
Yeah.
of yeah, and the balance of giving and taking.
Mm. Beautiful.
Yeah,
Well,
I've marveled at Schnee's work. Schnee Victoria. I
yeah.
don't know if you've seen her work, but she would have 30 people in the room in Constellation. It's my God, it's how you were. But eventually there was something that was distilled from that.
So
And
she
it
does chaos constellations, isn't that right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to me it felt like chaos. But it all came together. She just
Yeah.
everybody was sort of in the field and welcome.
Wow. Yeah. I've done some big collective constellations
Uh,
in different communities and stuff doing something for that. And where you end up or where I've ended up with like I might have 50 people in the workshop and I've got 40 of them in the field, And
wow.
I know, and it's fascinating. Like we'll just sit there and write things out because in the communities up in the far north, far north, there's been a lot of poverty, a lot of drug, and a lot of neglect from from the government and all that sort of stuff. So we've done some work around seeing what systemically we can do to support that for the people of the area. Yeah, on the request of the people of the
Yeah,
area.
yeah.
So to have, like you got 40 people in the field, but they're not all just going around being chaotic. It's like quite, yeah, writing things down and then just walking around, giving them all a piece of paper and getting them to hold it and then get the feedback from them. So, and then,
Mm-hmm.
but without saying them knowing who they are, what they are. And then I get the person, because there's usually one person in the hot seat, and I'll get them to let's go through and unwind this and see where, and then you start to see all these things thread together. It's this
Yeah,
beautiful
yeah,
weaving coming together. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, but not
yeah,
quite in Sinead's way with her chaos constellations. I'd love to see that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I,
brilliant.
I mean, this was some time ago. It'd be interesting to see her work now. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share before we sign off here today?
I think it's just lovely chatting with you and in a way knowing or getting to know how you began and all that and
Hmm.
sharing my part of the story and how we meet.
If
And
there's someone who's in India or planning to go to India and they want to do some work with you or find a workshop, how would they get in touch with you?
they could have my email ID or, if you or my telephone number. And if I'm doing something, I will say so. And if I know someone else I can recommend, I'll do that. Yeah, sure.
Fantastic. You don't have a website?
I do. I do have a website. It's www.spanda.asia, spanda.asia, ASIA. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
they would find it there. But if they want to know what others are doing, then they'll have to get in touch with me. Yeah, that may
Yeah,
not be on my website. Yeah, yeah,
brilliant. That's so good.
yeah.
Well, thank you
Thank you.
so much,
It
Annie.
was,
It's been a pleasure.
yeah, it's been lovely to meet you in this way, Tracy.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, and it was a
Thank you
pleasure to
for
meet you in
inviting.
person
Yeah,
as well. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. Head over to Instagram and tell me what's resonated for you with this episode. You'll find me at tracy.cartwright. That's Tracy with no E, .cartwright. Or head over to my website, tracycartwright.co.nz, and receive a free audio with the gift from your ancestors. So until next time, be kind to yourself and have fun doing it.